like to provide just a quick welcome.
I'll do it from right here because it is going to be quick, because I know it's going to be a very full day. Thank you so much for being here with us today and continuing the ongoing discussion between us and industry and on some of our other federal and state partners that can go forward with our new statewide program. As Yvonne said, I enjoyed a week off last week. Drove our son back down to Camp Pendleton, came back in the Central Valley with no air conditioning yesterday, so you might see I'm still a little bit soaked here. But I'm going to really leave it to her and the team that put together this agenda. A lot of thought and work has gone into this. I know some of you were involved in some of the framing of it. And I'll be here all day today. If any of you would like to talk one-on-one, any concerns, any suggestions, so forth, I would love to talk to you. So thanks so much again for being here.
Excuse me. So flow for the session this morning. As you know, these are the beginning of the implementation of our new statewide program. So this is the first of 3 scoping sessions, and we may be scheduling more. I'm not sure at this point, right? To take a look at the emergency regulations that are required by the statute, specifically certificates of financial responsibility and contingency planning. We broke up the session today into 2, from 9 to 12 and from 1 to 4 this afternoon. This morning is rail. So if you're actually going to be staying for the afternoon session, there may be some redundancy for you. So I just wanted to give you that sense. So one of the things I always taught you in like speech classes and facilitation classes is you tell people what you're going to tell them, and then later you tell them what they told them. So I just wanted to give you a sense of what we're going to be doing today. So Tom provided the welcome. I'll be giving you a general context of how it is that at the executive at OSPR, as well as the governor's office, is really looking at the expansion and implementation of this program within the larger framework of emergency response organizations and regulations already in the inland environment. I'll go over the agenda a little bit just so that you have a sense of who's speaking and doing what. And then I will introduce the OSPR team so you know who we are. And then at that point, I will probably ask everyone to just stand up and introduce yourselves very quickly. Ryan will provide an overview of the new requirements in SB 861. Sorry, Ryan, I saw your hand go up. I thought, oh, did I say something wrong already? And then there's going to be a series of presentations. The first 2 or 3, I have to think about this now, is going to be by Chris Klump. Those are going to be associated primarily with contingency plan requirements, or I should say requirements, sort of our concepts of what we're thinking about in terms of contingency plan for statewide. And then Mike Zamora will be providing a similar presentation on certificates of financial responsibility. As we close out each of those presentations, that is the time. Obviously, if you have questions during the session, you can ask that, but at the close of each one, it will be the time that we want to get input from you as to what it is that we presented, things that we may or may not understand about your operation or about things that happen in the statewide environment. For those of you who may not know her, this is Joy Lavin-Jones. She is our sole regulations unit right now. And she also just got back from vacation in Alaska.
Yes, I did.
And had a great time in Seward, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So she will be the note taker. It is her responsibility and mine as the facilitator to make sure that we capture all of your thoughts and we get it down. And then finally, we will close with the next steps, what you can expect from us after these scoping sessions are finished. So in a slide, okay, because Ryan is going to go through the nuts and the bolts of SB 861. It provides funding and the authority for a California oil spill planning and response organization for waters of the state. So we often think about we are going to take what we think is a very successful program of partnership and working with stakeholders as well as other local and state agencies on the marine side and moving it inland. But I don't want anyone to think that we are really just adding an inland component to our marine program. We are truly looking at being a statewide program and being able to utilize the resources and the expertise that we have developed on the marine side statewide. OSPR is committed to creating an integrated and efficient and effective program. I mean, I know that sounds like a lot of jargon there, but what that really means is that OSPR is very aware of the fact that there is an ongoing rich environment of emergency response statewide, having to do with the Office of Emergency Services. Do we have emergency services here today? Excellent. And working with the locals and the LEPCs, Fire Marshal, and I saw back over here, Mike Bridgewine, and Dogger. I don't know if I saw Dogger here, but you know, we are aware that there's a lot of regulation, a lot of work that has been going on in the inland environment while we've been focusing on marine. And we're not interested in duplicating efforts. We're not interested in having conflicting information. We are interested in adding more to that environment so that California is better protected. And that OSPR finally, in some of the discussions that I've had, and I know Tom has had with folks over the last several months, is that we appreciate that there may be intrinsic differences in how response happens on the inland environment versus the marine environment. There are things that are the same, but there may be things that are different. So that is part of what we need to gain from these scoping sessions, as well as when we start rolling out this program of how do we best do that? How do we best integrate into the system that's currently here? How do we bring the perspective that OSPR can bring and make things better for both on the planning and preparedness side, as well as the response and restoration side? Okay, and I probably just reset everything I was going to say in the slide. So again, we are committed to folding into that framework and enhancing capabilities, whether it is working with local governments directly, whether it is becoming a part of the very robust, in California, training that goes on through Fire Scope, that goes on through State Fire Marshal, that goes on with OES, to make sure that whatever funds we have for that kind of training is leveraged well and consistently throughout the state. Also, and we all know this, but I think it bears mentioning, that all response is local. It all starts locally, it begins locally, and OSPR is, as well as the governor's office, is aware that although, bless you, that although this expansion of authority for OSPR addresses statewide response to oils of the state, and that's a big help, obviously, it is not the entire picture. There are other training needs, there are other equipment needs locally in terms of maintaining hazmat, in terms of training statewide. That is something that we are going to be a part of, working with the leadership of the administration to see how best to address those things. And then finally, the unified command structure. I mean, I think I'm preaching to the choir here, right? Everybody here has worked one way or the other with the unified command structure, and OSPR is no different. So, however, and the blessing, I guess I would say, of the unified command structure is that it is flexible. If the major threat at that particular time is a Homeland Security threat, you may have FBI, you may have Homeland Security, you may have any of a number of people also in the unified command taking lead on those things. If the main threat is public health and safety and fire, you're going to have local fire agencies, you may have state, CAL FIRE there working on those kinds of threats. At the same time that you're going to have OSPR and water boards and those types of people working on the threats to the environment. The unified command has broad enough shoulders that it allows for the incorporation of all those needs, and making sure that all the resources are distributed well so that happens. Okay? And again, I'm repeating myself, but we really view this as an opportunity for us to integrate more fully in the local planning process. That may be through the LEPCs, and however we work, and Chris is going to talk about this in a little bit, conceptually how we're thinking about geographic response plans in the inland. Obviously on the marine side, it was done by captain of the port zones, and that made it simple and relatively easy. Things inland may not be so simple and relatively easy, so we're interested in your thoughts on what that might look like. But regardless, we're not going to ask industry, we're not going to ask governments to duplicate a whole bunch of information that is required or already exists. We are really going to look at the added perspective that we bring having to do with trustee agency authority for the state. How is it that those plans can be used to help protect environmentally sensitive sites? And if you're not able to protect those sites, because it happens, you know, oil hits the water and things happen, then how are we going to clean that up in a way that allows for natural resource damage assessment and restoration in the long run? I already talked about our commitment to integrating more fully into the statewide training, whether it's through fire marshal, OES, and helping to bring sort of that perspective to the ongoing emergency response training. Framework for planning requirements, and I would say that this is also a framework for drills and exercises coordination. I know that a number of us have heard that folks are very concerned about being drilled to death, right? There's drills that happen at the local level, there's drills that happen in coordination with requirements having to do with production facility, you know, the railroads drill a fair amount, and so, no, we're not going to require that you duplicate drills that are already happening, and we're very interested in integrating into that drilling process. And if there are additional drills that we need to call having to do with resource trustee authority, having to do with, okay, well, how are you going to do site-sensitive strategies and protection measures, it will be in addition to what is already there. And Chris will probably talk about this, bless you, more fully, but you know, on the marine side, we allow for substitution. So if you do a drill and you are successful at that drill and there's another agency that can verify that, you may be able to submit it to OSPR to meet our drilling requirements. So we are open to those kinds of concepts as well. And again, to ensure that whatever requirements we have work in concert with the requirements that are already there and are value added. There's no purpose in having extra requirements just to have extra requirements. The requirements are there to make sure that we, as a response community, whether you're local government, your state agency, your federal agency, your industry, are as prepared as we possibly can be for an event we hope never happens. So, at this point, I guess I'm just going to do a quick show of hands and then we'll do a quick round to introduce who we are. How many folks are here from industry? Excellent. How many folks are here from OSROs? Okay. Local government agencies? Awesome, thank you. Other state agencies? I shouldn't say other state agencies, that would be OSPR too. Okay, federal agencies? This is great. Any NGO or environmental partners? I'm sorry, there's places that close. Okay, and then anybody I didn't cover? Sort of interested citizens? Yes. Well, we'll find out who you are when we get there. So with that, I think I'm just going to ask us to just quickly stand up and introduce ourselves. You know who I am. You know who Joy is. Why don't we start with you, Eric?
Steve Gonzalez.
Sorry, Steve.
That's all right. Public Information Officer for OSPR.
I'm Matt Grisvani. I'm a TAC member, Technical Advisory Committee for OSPR.
Dale Schrader, Patriot Environmental Services, Osro Response Contractor.
And I'm the Fish and Wildlife Department Legislative Representative.
I'm Don Zarowski. I'm Federal EPA Launching Coordinator.
Kathy Ides, City of Oakland, Emergency Manager.
Darren White, Oakland Fire Department Special Operations.
Gordon Trent, California Energy Commission, Senior Analyst in tenure and age.
Brian White, KP Public Affairs. We represent various energy companies, including Western States Petroleum Association. Sounds like we have a last names of White here.
Perspective California State Lands Commission, Northern California Supervisor.
Tricia Sachin, Cotton Health Services, Hazmat Partners.
And Holly Gellerman, OSPR, the Wildlife Coordinator. Lori Chumney, Environmental Scientist with OSPR. Jan Rangerneck, OSPR Deputy Lab Director.
Dan Warwick is with OSPR Laboratory.
I'm Judd Muscat, I'm the GIS Coordinator at OSPR.
Cindy Murphy, Local Government Grants Coordinator with OSPR.
Isabel Baird, California Wildlife North Central Region. I'm a Senior Supervisor for Habitat Conservation.
We try really hard not to speak in acronyms, but we forget ourselves.
Jim Bowen, Cal EPA Assistant Secretary Local
Government and emergency response.
Sarah Everett, Chevron.
Bill Fuller, Yuba City Fire, Chair of LAPC Region 3 and Yuba Sutter Hazmat Response Team.
Excellent.
Lisa Sherritt, State Board of Equalization, Special Taxes.
Richard Sherritt, State Board of Equalization, Special Taxes.
Jason Ehan, NOC Environmental, I'm an Oswald response contractor.
Dana Carey, Yolo County Office of Emergency Services.
John Pagansky with Platte County Central Hazmat Team Responder, and also at UC Davis Fire Department, and I sit on the California State Committee for Fire Scope for Hazard Control and Response.
Heidi Huron, Platte County Office of Emergency Services.
Gary Flores with the Federal Railroad Administration Region 7, representing the Hazardous Material Division.
Rich Betta with NRC Environmental Services, and Northern California Regional Operations Manager. They're the local audit contractor.
Terry Jocelyn, Blue Water and Associates.
Sandy Barrow, Board of Equalization, Special Taxes.
Jennifer Hopkins, Board of Equalization, Special Taxes.
Julie Huber, Board of Equalization, Special Taxes.
Jeff Williams, Chevron Shipping Company, San Ramon.
I'm Annie Nelson with OSPR, Drills and Exercises Coordinator for Army Health.
Dave Bucklow, Central California Traction Company Emergency Responder and West Coast Transcare Coordinator.
Carlos Sanchez, Union Pacific Railroad, Hazardous Materials Manager.
Dan Tynika, Emergency Response Coordinator, Chevron Richmond.
Tony V. Chapman, reporter with the Sacramento.
That would be interested citizens.
Harry Fuji, Air Response Manager, Northern California Marine Spill Response Corporation.
Good to see you, Larry.
Steve Sawyer, Oscar.
Kyle Hayes, Fish and Wildlife, Bay Delta Region Pollution Coordinator.
Becky Stanton, Oscar Toxicologist and Resource Restoration.
Steve Hampton, Resource Economist with Oscar.
Tom Emenhofer, Western States Petroleum Association.
I'm Steve Ricks with Marine Spill Response Corporation.
Todd Barr, Emergency Response Manager for Shell, based in Houston.
Terry Wolfman, Shell Pipeline Off Support, Western Region.
Joseph Brown, Emergency Response Coordinator, Clean Harbors.
Dave Price, OSPR, part of the Northern California Field Response Team. Eric Laughlin, OSPR Public Affairs.
Jane Borgnagel, California Department of Fish and Wildlife. I was OSPR Inland Response when we had inland money. And I'm the Water Rights Coordinator, the Water Quality Biologist, and the Emergency Response for Northern California Region.
Linda Skirtis, San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission.
Kathleen Jennings, I'm the Scientific Field Responder and the Marine Area Contingency Plan Coordinator.
Craig Hafner, Oscar, Northern California Field Response. Dave Martin, Shell Pipeline, Main Supervisor, South Dakota.
Paul Hamilton, California Fish and Wildlife Law Enforcement.
Mike Richwine, CAL FIRE Office, State Fire Marshal, and the Assistant State Fire Marshal.
Thomas Campbell, California Office of Emergency Services, Fire Rescue Division, Deputy Chief Hazmat.
Excellent. So did we miss anybody? Again, I did.
Duncan McFarland, Marine Technical Advisor for Shell California.
On contingency planning and certificates of financial responsibility, that they are focused on those emergency regulations. We want to provide a forum for discussing ideas and gathering specific suggestions that you may have for us, and then gather specific input from stakeholders to improve our regulations and our upcoming program. And you've already seen the slide, so I just wanted to let you know where we are. Did we miss anybody in the OSPR team? Steve Sawyer introduced himself. He's also the head attorney as well as the supervisor for the regulations. And so with that, I will go to a blank slide, Randy. And then I will introduce to you Ryan Todd, who is one of our staff attorneys and has really done an amazing, incredible yeoman's job. I hope that that's the right term. No, he shakes his head no, but you can see Julie shaking her head yes. In really helping us work through all the language, all the legal issues, And for those who have ongoing questions legally, it is probably going to be Ryan who we are going to be working with in-house.
We really want to get your feedback about how to roll this out.
No pun intended.
So as I said, it was chaptered earlier this year in June. It had an emergency, take effect immediately clause. That's why we're doing this now. Normal legislation takes effect in January, but this one was written to be immediate. As Yvonne said, it's modeled off of our Marine program, which has been in place since 1991. We're just trying to take the whole thing and make it statewide. And the key components are contingency plans. Is there anyone in here that just is not familiar with contingency plans? Good. I don't mean good, but I mean, if there were, we might talk a little differently to you folks. Financial responsibility, drills and exercises, our rating program for cleanup contractors, and so the bill took those things, and those are the key pieces of our regulatory program, but it also provided a stable funding source to implement the program statewide, both administrative funding and response funding. So as we've said, our program was originally just a Marine program. We did a really good job, we think, protecting the coast, but that left a lot of the state uncovered. So it's now statewide, and in terms of operators that might be new to the program, it's generally some pipelines, oil wells, and railroads. So we're here to roll out emergency regulations, and our hope is to get contingency plan regs and financial responsibility regs in place this fall. There will be several other packages we will probably do, but we're focusing on these ones first, and they are, there will be emergency regs. They're in place for a year, and that time frame built into the code allows us to get something on the ground and be operational, and allows us to develop additional reg packages in the process and get something on the ground and run. This is just a summary of what's required in the statute. It should be familiar to everybody. It's basics, it's written, it's signed. You have a list of contracts. You know your contacts. You know who you're going to call out. You have a QI, agent for service of process. We all use some form of incident command system, and drills. So we are required to accomplish best achievable protection for our contingency plan requirements. And we implement the Department of Fish and Wildlife's trustee responsibility for habitat and critters, basically. So that's what our focus is. Yvonne talked about how incident management works. If there's a fire, local fire will be handling the fire. But at some point, the focus will be wildlife and habitat. And as the state trustee for wildlife and habitat, our program is focused on those goals. Our contingency plans are driven by reasonable worst case spill volume, which is what we will talk a lot about later today. Chris is going to discuss that. We have to set standards for response and containment. We have to set standards and requirements for equipment that will be needed within certain time frames. The law requires use of a cleanup contractor by January 2016 for the inland part of the state. That contractor must be one of the contractors that we rate. And our requirements are that we have to develop strategies for protection of wildlife, sensitive sites, and on the coast, those are done through the area contingency plans. In the inland part of the state, there'll be the geographic response plans. But until those are in place, we'll be looking to you folks to help figure out what those strategies are and put those into your response plan, so you know what waterways and what sensitive areas there are to be protected. Mike will talk about this later, but the law requires some sort of financial responsibility to demonstrate the ability to pay for damages and costs and musical methods that are available. But if you can come up with another method, we're open to it. Those are generally the ones that people use. Drills, we'll talk about drills, but we're required to do announced and unannounced drills to test the plan and to test folks' ability to implement their cleanup strategies. And all the elements of the plan must be tested at least once every 3 years. So the bill also extended, and it's a long bill, it's like hundreds of pages, but so our little portion of it is generally the government code. So one of the things it did was it extends the oil wildlife care network statewide. It increased their funding by $500,000. The network, if you're not familiar with it, it's something like 32 participants up and down the coast, and they're ready to go if there's oil wildlife at its bill. So their authority is now going to be statewide. We are looking at perhaps developing a facility in the Bakersfield area and other parts of the state. That's something we'll have to figure out over the next year or so. And the contingency plans that you develop have to either point to use of the OWCN as your method for treating oil wildlife, or if you have some other way of treating oil wildlife, you can submit that and we can take a look at it. The bill changed the spill reporting requirement. Is any amount of oil in state waters. That makes it consistent with OES's requirement and the U.S. Coast Guard. And it had been 42 gallons into marine waters, unless the state also plan adopted a different standard, which it did, but this solidifies it at any amount. The bill also requires OES's phone number to be posted at several locations so that OES can be contacted quickly. For funding, for 20 plus years, we've been collecting a fee at oil brought into marine terminals. It's presently 6.5 cents. So the bill just took that 6.5 cents and made it statewide, so it is now any oil or petroleum products coming into a refinery or a marine terminal. Crude oil or produced products. The Board of Equalization will be collecting the fee, which is what they've been doing for the marine fee, and they were given basically a 90-day period to develop their program for collecting that, and I think they can speak for themselves, but I think they're expected to start collecting in the middle or end of September. And the bill also expanded our response trust fund. For years, we've had a fund that was available to pay for cleanup and response along the coast, but there was never a similar fund for inland spill response, and the bill now allows that fund to be used for any oil spill in state waters. And state waters is surface waters, not ground waters. When you see surface waters, that's what we mean. The regional water boards do groundwater cleanup, and we're not going into their jurisdiction. And that's it. We want to spend the rest of the afternoon getting to Chris's vision. Yes, sir, good question.
Question, does this apply to ethanol now that's shipped into the state or not?
Ethanol, a petroleum product. I'm asking a dumb question, I know.
Is it? I don't know if it meets your definition.
I don't know, but I'm only but that's exactly the kind of thing we want to talk about. We have a chemist here, maybe somebody knows.
So I would say that to this point, it's no, obviously we know, or I shouldn't say we know, we've been told that there is some ethanol production that can come out of petroleum products, but in general, we are looking at specific petroleum products. Am I wrong, Jeff? Please tell me if I'm wrong, because...
I've never heard of that.
Okay, perfect.
The only thing I've heard of is...
So then the answer right now is...
corn being squeezed back east and
right.
this way.
Yeah, that's...
No-ish. It is no-ish.
I guess along the line what Dave was saying, this program proposal is
is for petroleum-based products, whether regulated or not. So whether it's a hazardous material or just an oil per se, non-regulated, it's going to be covered under this program, is that correct?
It's only crude oil or petroleum products, so when you mention like hazmat, it's not chlorine.
Well, crude oil, the one we're all worried about, the
Yeah.
Bakken is regulated. I'm talking about petroleum oils and some other things that are covered as an oil in the federal regulations.
So you're talking about fish oil and corn oil,
There's other
we do
things
not
that are
cover
covered.
that.
Yeah, it's
So
not.
you're not covering that.
You're not going to cover that? Okay.
So it won't be like fish oil if that's the general.
We're not covering fish oil, we're not covering corn oil, those are not petroleum
Okay,
products.
so as a program for oil, it's just linked to petroleum-based products.
Yes, and so the fee, there's two components here. There's the fee collection, which is crude oil or petroleum products delivered to a refinery or marine terminal. The other aspect is the planning for any type of hydrocarbon, liquid hydrocarbon.
So for the railroad side, if there are releases in waterways from releases, railroad accidents or incidents, you're not going to respond because it's not petroleum-based.
We will respond.
So I think what's helpful is maybe to step back to the department's authority, right? So as you probably all know, OSPR is a part of the department, and the department is required to respond to any deleterious substances that impacts fish or wildlife or waters of the state, okay? Fish oil is a deleterious substance. Corn oil is milk is a deleterious substance if you happen to be a fish. So the department has that authority. The administrator is often has been asked by the department to serve as the state on-scene coordinator for that authority. So the department could ask us to come in and help assist in that cleanup, but we would have to find a different funding because this fund can only be used for petroleum and crude oil, right? Yeah, Terry.
Where is that authority given?
To the department, 5650 and 5651, correct? Am I missing anything? Paul, please.
Oh, there's quite a few.
5650 is the general law that says don't put anything deleterious to fish, anything deleterious to wildlife in state waters. But it also lists out some specific substances which include petroleum. And that 5650 can actually be traced back to the 1873 Penal Code, which is pretty cool. I think it was 1872 Penal Code.
Spoken like a true lawyer.
And then there was an 1873 Penal Code. So you can trace the genesis of the text. And that phrase deleterious has been in there for I don't know, like 80 years or some crazy amount of time. It might have even been in the 1800s. It's pretty cool.
So OSPR has a subset of what is the overall department authority.
And so that's where the authority is given for emergency response management to any deleterious substance released in the state.
Correct.
And so 861 specifically then would apply to petroleum. How is it worded? Is it crude oil and petroleum substances?
Yeah.
So that means anything with a petroleum base?
Yes.
Slops.
Yeah, slops and, there's quite a bit. Are you?
Go ahead, Terry.
I'm trying to focus on.
That's 5650, it's in our fish and game code, so we enforce it. And another point of history, before there was a Department of Fish and Wildlife, there was a Board of Fish Commissioners, and they had a pollution division. I'd love to know more about it. But anyway, there was this division way back when, like the 1920s. And so we have been enforcing water pollution for quite a long time. I don't know if this directly answers your question, but it's something our staff, our enforcement staff, our wildlife.
861 is specifically been worded as crude oil and petroleum substances.
Products? I think it's products. But if you have specifics, as well as anybody else who has specifics about this, we can talk about it if we have time at the end or after the meeting, obviously.
I was just wondering what the exact wording
Right.
was.
And you can find it online. Yes, please.
Ron, you mentioned that the fee will also apply to crude oil production in California. Is that correct?
crude oil or petroleum products delivered to a refinery or marine terminal.
So not production from, not California source production. You won't be,
If there's oil produced in the Central Valley and it's delivered to a refinery,
by rail
it
and,
doesn't matter how it gets done.
okay, so
Pipeline,
all the
rail,
pipelines, so all the receipts to the
truck.
refinery. Okay.
bucket,
Don't say airplane, it's okay.
Follow-up to that is, so this is receipt at the refinery or marine terminal.
yes,
It won't be for exports.
correct.
Okay.
There is our oil spill response trust fund that is collected on exports. However, there's a cap on that fund, and it hasn't been collected since 1991 because that cap has been met. But for this funding, it's only essentially imports.
Yes, please.
You know about imports of ethanol, pure ethanol has to be marked with gasoline so emergency responders can see it. So it would have at least 1% up to 10% injected of gasoline. So if you're worried about being taxed, are you taxing the percentage of the petroleum gasoline, or you can then tax the whole load, which is mixed? Because it does come into California quite a bit as
Or
pure.
teenager.
You're going to have to make it so we can see it. That's
Right, okay.
that may be something to look into in the
Okay,
future.
we'll have to look at that, yeah.
Because that does change how emergency responders will combat fire suppression. Because,
Right.
you know, looking at how phones work is a big scientific.
Right, and go ahead, Lynn. I was going to say, I think that when we again ask these questions, and all very good questions, you know, OSPR has specific authority. And so, obviously, if there is a response and we need to respond to that, we will respond to it either from our own authority or if we are asked by the department to respond under that authority. But also, the question is, would we then need to regulate ethanol in purposes of plans and certificates of financial responsibility? And that's not where that's not where we're planning on going. Now, there's, I'll get you in a second, Todd. Do you want me to get you now?
No, this is,
Okay.
no, ethanol is not a petroleum-based product.
Absolutely.
Ethanol is an alcohol.
Right.
And it's put in there, the petroleum that's put in there, whatever to make it denatured, is just for getting it cleared or classifying it, so it is not included. It should not be included. If we're talking about crude petroleum-based products, and it is not.
We are not disagreeing.
Okay.
I said no issue earlier.
Okay.
Yes, Jeff?
Yeah, could you define state waters? For example, let's say a dry wash coming off an alluvial plain in the middle of the desert.
This would be a geologist.
We're going to talk about that, Jeff.
And it only gets water once a year, once every year.
So we will talk about that later in the presentation.
Thank you.
Excellent. Other quick questions for Ryan?